Rudy used to talk a lot about spiritual muscle. And he described it as a muscle that, rather than grasping and holding, is a muscle of letting go and surrender. It's a muscle that one learns to relax and allow to stay relaxed, to stay open. And in many ways, the work we do in this particular class is a kind of muscle workout, learning how to sustain openness and how to sustain stillness. More than anything else, this is a class about being still. And it is about being still on multiple levels. One of them clearly is keeping your body still. Another is about keeping your mind still. And another is about keeping your emotions still. The impression is that when I say that, keeping something still seems to involve a holding effort. Hold still. Hold quiet. Keep your emotions in check. And so it implies this kind of constriction. And really it's the opposite. Hold still means let go of movement. Quieting your thoughts means allowing them to be without engagement. Emotions, which are produced often by thoughts, rise up. The objective is not to stop them from arising, it's to allow them to be without getting sucked into them. You don't have to fight to avoid them, you have to surrender. You let them be, you let emotions be, you let your thoughts be, you let your physical body be. This letting and allowing takes an enormous amount of practice, as everyone here knows. Most people, when they sit for the first time, are completely caught up in the discomfort of the physical, the noise of the mental, and the distraction of the emotional. And for many people, it's get me out of here as fast as you can. And I watch those people. I have over the course of years, sitting in the class in enormous pain on every level. And I've also watched people come in and saying, this isn't going to work. There's no way I can't sit still, I can't keep my mind still, I can't do anything. And I just tell them, try. Just sit down and try and see what happens. And it's often fascinating because some of the people who are the most resistant and really believe they'll never be able to do it, they sit down in the class and something happens. They go, oh. It actually feels really, really good to sit still. It is a blessing to not engage your thoughts and to be free of your emotional involvement. It's a blessing. And so when people come into the class and there is an environment in which there are a whole group of people doing that, It creates a still pool. It's like the difference between walking through Times Square and coming onto this property. When people drive onto this property, it's like, oh, it's so quiet. Huh. Now, if you come here having just left Times Square and it's still jangling you, or still attracting you, you may find the stillness that's represented here frightening. But for most people, it's like, oh yeah, huh, I forgot about that. And they settle in. And people come into the class and they just go okay. And in the quiet and the stillness of the class, especially for many people the first time, something opens. I call it the portal. When you get really, really quiet inside, and it really, really gets very still, it's a little bit like looking at the bottom of the pond. You know, a few little ripples, you can't see the bottom of the pond. But when it's really still, you look down and the first thing you see is your own reflection. You see yourself very clearly. If you can see yourself without getting drawn to yourself, just see it and look past it, you see the depth of the pond. You see the depth of your own self. You really look deeply into you. And it's not a mental cognitive experience. It is a falling into or a relaxing into yourself. What it feels like more than anything else is what it feels like when you fall asleep at night. The first thing is the little ripple of mind and dream. You know, when you first start to go to sleep at night, I meditate before I go to sleep, so I always just sit there. And I watch the process. And I watch the mind, and it's usually fairly rational for a little bit. And then it becomes somewhat irrational. Things come up that don't have anything to do with anything. They kind of appear. And I always see that as, okay, this is the beginning of the breaking down of the rational. And then it becomes relatively irrational. Things just start coming up that are dreamlike. They don't last very long. And then it gets like, and that's when I lie down. That's when I say, okay, time to sleep. I lie down, and of course within about a tenth of a second I'm gone, completely gone. But in meditation, you sit there and you see the ripples of your mind, the ripples of emotionality. You see the noise, the discomforts. And then you just sit, and then it gets quiet and irrational. Things come up, just like in the dream state. Things start to manifest, and you sort of look at it, and then you go, relax, the muscle of letting go, surrender, and then you see deep into the pond of you. And rather than go to sleep, which is the cue that most people have at night, the cue here is exactly different. You go into this extraordinary sense of awakening. It's like, oh yeah. And it is the antithesis of sleep. It feels like sleep because it is so comforting. It is so sweet and embracing and allowing and big and actually kind of beyond description, because it doesn't quite have boundaries, it doesn't quite have any kind of specific content, and if the mind isn't operating, it's really empty. But it's also full at the same time, which is the wonderful duality. And it feels like home. It feels like comfort. It feels like embrace. It feels like the thing you are always looking for in life. And it's right there, right in the core of you. And the only entryway into that is this thing called stillness. And then the muscle of surrender. The approach is called meditation. You sit, you get quiet, and you find the doorway to this vast, immeasurable, sleep-like but really awakened awareness. And when you get there, there is no desire for anything or anywhere else. Nothing will equal it. It's so whole, it's so full, it's so satisfying that you just go. And it doesn't really want to be disturbed. So you just sit there. You discover often that you can go deeper into that space. And you don't have to really make the effort to go deeper. There is a kind of force pulling you gently. Into you. When you're sitting in that space and you look at another person, you don't see them as separate. You don't see them as other. You see them as yourself. Not only do you see them as yourself, you experience them as yourself. You experience them by feeling them. And when you feel someone really deeply from that space, what you feel is that which is open and flowing, and that which is not open and flowing, that which is restricted, contained, confined, not harmonious with that space. But if you are really established into that space, what you do when you go to somebody else and feel that in them is you, if you're capable of this is a teacherly function. You go to that disharmony, maybe it's jagged thing that's going on inside them, kind of an old thing. And what you try to do, or what seems to happen, because there's not a lot of actual trying, something goes to that jagged space and it goes, basically, it's okay. It's okay. This is very quiet, it's very subterranean, if you will, but it calms that space down. It touches it. The mere fact that there is something at that depth, touching something in your depth, is extraordinary. And something in you feels it. Something in you knows you have been touched deeply, deeply. And the thing that happens inside is that jaggedness goes, oh. And it's so grateful. It's not dissimilar to that thing of somebody touching you on the back when you're in suffering mode, or taking your hand, or stroking your face. But it happens inside. It happens in depth. And it changes that vibration. And afterward, after your meditation, and you return to more bodily awareness and the engagement of the world, that thing inside you has been tamed, relaxed. It may come back. I, as a teacher, often find when I sit with people that the thing I worked on the week before or a month before has returned. One of the extraordinary things that Rudy taught me about being a teacher was what he called patience. Because if you go to somebody who has the same vibration returning year after year, day after day, on a regular basis, the temptation of the human mind is to just get angry and pissed at it. But the spiritual depth doesn't do that at all. It just goes back and with enormous, unending compassion, touches it again, relaxes it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. It's a true act of love, forgiveness, kindness, and compassion. And once this has been done for you for any period of time, and you start to get it, and you start to be able to sit really still and do this muscular letting go, and if you have this inclination or this built-in karmic need, you will be a teacher. And you will be able to do the same thing for other people. Whether you sit in a formal setting like this and actually do an eye-to-eye meditation, or you just are sitting across the table from somebody at lunch and feel their pain, you still can do the same thing. I do it all the time. You know, we're having lunch and people think we're just talking about anything, and I just go, just throw a switch. They'll never know it. They don't even know I'm a teacher. They have no idea that anything is happening. Doesn't matter to me, because that's what I do when I can do it. When it happens, when I say I do it, clearly I hope you understand, it's not Bruce sitting around doing it. That's really when Bruce is no longer the primary functioning element. This is what we're all trying to do. We're all sitting here in the simplest way, trying to get still. Trying in that stillness to be open and to discover and find our deepest self. It's all effortful, it's all practice, it's all something that one does. The illusion is, honestly, that you are achieving and doing something. The illusion is, I am surrendering, I am in charge of this, I am the person making this happen. And that's really, in a way, I was going to say the final barrier. It's not quite the final barrier, but it's the final illusion that you're doing anything. You think you're doing this whole meditation, I am sitting still, I am letting go of my thoughts and my emotions, I am this special entity. I have achieved something. But all you've done is you've, in that regard, achieved a new identity. I am the thing that lets go of things. And that's as much a problematic space as being I am the king of the world, or I am, you know, I'm a great musician or a terrible musician, or a great this or a terrible that. All of those are just ideas, they're concepts, they're in your head. And they too have to go away. I read a line from Adi Ashanti a week ago, which I was very touched by. He said, most of us want meditation to be the raft that carries us into stillness and peace. He said there is no you to be carried into stillness and peace. The truth is, you have to burn the raft. In true stillness and peace, there is no you. It's really like when you're in deep sleep. It's really extraordinary in deep sleep. I'm not talking dream sleep where there's still remnants of the elemental you. Dream sleep is completely empty. And of course it is almost entirely unconscious, so When you are in deep sleep, there's no you, but there's also nothing, there's no anything. In meditation, in the depth of that space, it feels exactly like deep sleep. No you, no separation, no duality at all. But there is this awareness, this constant. It's not a constant that you have, it's a constant that just is. It's awakening to deep sleep, if you will, awakening to pure being. It feels at first, like I described, as that embrace, and then it doesn't feel like anything. Neither light nor dark, good nor bad, up or down, sweet, sour, nothing. And again, the mind goes, I don't know if I like that. You want it to be spicy, you want it to be something. But when you let go of the mind, it doesn't want that, it doesn't need that, it doesn't need anything. So it just becomes this. And then, at some point along the way, the thing that describes itself as you goes boop, or they pull that one, yank it out. There's various mechanisms for this. Or they yank out a lot of it and there's still pieces. But whatever it is, there is just this being. And so there you are, deeply awake in consciousness and awareness, and the world arises. So you are like this hole in the middle of all of this. And that's the next step of your spiritual work. How do I live in this as an empty hole? There may be a lot to do, there may be nothing to do, depending on your condition at that point. How clear the hole is, you might say. Because often there are remnants, what I call the elementals, of the person you were. And they're there still responding to all of this. And I'm discovering in my own particular situation that they're responding with enormous intensity. So there are elemental feelings rising up inside this being that I have never witnessed before. And they are not completely comfortable. I've never had feelings at the depth that I'm feeling at this moment in time. And it's really hard to deal with on some level. You just have to let it be. But, we drove last night by a man outside with a little baby in a cart, and it's freezing out, and he seemed totally disinterested in his baby. And the baby was squirming and crying, and all I wanted to do was jump out of the car and say, you can't do this. You can't treat this baby with this amount of disinterest. It's not right. I was walking down the street on 42nd Street last week, and there's a guy lying on the ground, shaking. And everyone's walking by him. And he seems so totally out of it. And my old reaction is join the masses and keep walking. This is just New York. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So I pulled out my cell phone and I called 911 and I stood with the guy and he was just shaking. And I kept saying, are you all right? He said, go away, go away, go away. He didn't want me there. It was really fascinating. I mean, I could not be there. And I couldn't continue walking. And the paramedics came very fast. I was really kind of impressed. And it was really kind of interesting what happened. The minute they got there, suddenly there were all these Good Samaritans. Like 12 people suddenly owned this guy. Like, we're the ones who called you. And it was really bizarre how it all went down. But what was so funny is this guy, the minute they arrived, jumped up. He stood up, said, "I don't need you. I don't need you," and he started walking away. I mean, and they're not going to take the guy in if he just says he doesn't need them. So he just kept walking. But I have no idea what his problem was. But I know I could not have kept walking and lived with me at this point. And before I could have, as I have done many a time, walked by people because someone will take care of them. Well, there's no more someone anymore. There's me. There's just me. That's all there is. I don't know anyone else ever to do it for anybody else because it's in front of me. Rudy used to say this thing which was very powerful to me. If it's in front of you, it's yours. That's really important. You can't walk away from what's yours. And so, for me, that's become the new paradigm. The level of feeling is really intense. The level of compassion is really intense. My own anxieties, which I have to own, are more intense than they've ever been. You know, the anxieties that used to be there, and I don't even call them Bruce's anxieties. They're like human anxiety. They are the thing that has to deal with what I call uncertainty. And I think right at this moment in our world culture, uncertainty is rearing its head in a very big way. And a lot of people are experiencing this not knowing, this fear of the unknown, the fear of what's next. You know, not that this hasn't existed for all time. You know, nobody's ever known what's next. But there were certain periods in our culture, and certainly in the last 50 years or so, where what's next felt a little bit predictable. Now it's not predictable. Living with uncertainty is a whole new level of living. And what is the best way to live with uncertainty? Meditation, if you will. Finding stillness, finding a way to allow the unknown, which is true and real, to be. That's what we're trying to do. Live trying to let the unknown be, and not to be afraid of it and not to fight it. And if you are afraid of it and if you do fight it, well, be that. Be that. The only way for me to truly know what the elemental particles are of this being is to let them play out. Let them do their dance. And that's what they're doing. I can try to change that. I can do my practice and try to, do what Rudy always taught, which was, let go and rise above. But I'm finding it more valuable in my own life to be in it. Be it. Be the thing that is. And I think I've learned how, over the course of all these years of meditation, to be in great discomfort without thinking I have to make it otherwise. And that has become a teaching. It has become a teaching for me. My practice now is not to turn it into something else. My practice is to be what it is. And I could only have learned to do that with all of the years of practice that I've had. It's the only way I could do this, because I've been practicing for 40, 50 years. I've said this many times, that all of this effort that we make, these years and years of effort, are to arrive not somewhere else, but where we are. All of this effort is to arrive where you've never left. It's crazy. But it's essential, because almost no one is here. You're in the room, you're walking down the street, you're driving the car, nobody's here. You're all somewhere else, all the time. You're always 2 seconds behind, or you're a second ahead, or weeks ahead, or years behind, but you're not here. I mean, you are here. That's the thing. You are here. You just don't realize that you're here. And that's why they call awakening realization. You realize, you go, I am right here. I've never been anywhere else but right here, ever. And never will be anywhere but right here. You can't be. But your mind can be, and your mind takes you on a million journeys, and some people never know at all that they are here, even that they were here. And so this whole thing is to become present, to arrive at where you are. Stillness, going deep, allowing the mind to get quiet, allowing the emotions to get quiet, which means not engaging, just letting go of them, just observing them. Going into the still pool, going deep into yourself, brings you to this. That's where you end up, right here. And that's the journey. And Rudy told me day one, it takes a lifetime. Shocking. It takes a complete lifetime to get here. Unless you're lucky. I mean, you know, the lucky is maybe the wrong word for it, but if there is an act of grace and you awaken earlier, wonderful. But you're still going to be here. It doesn't change that. It just means you will be aware of it earlier. Or maybe it's on your deathbed. Rudy talked a lot about that. That's the real awakening, where you're on your deathbed and you go, I have always been here. This is always real. I tend to think there's some benefit in awakening before that. And that's what we're doing. That's why you sit here. That's why you come here. Because somehow in this collective energy, we have arrived at this remarkable space that you rarely get anywhere else on the planet, which is you walk in this room and you're here. And if you're not here, the energy of the room will encourage you to get here. And you will walk out of this room being here. You may not carry it very far, but at least for some moment of time, you will have been present. And that is so wonderful and delicious and special and remarkable that each one of you makes these huge journeys to come here so you can be here. It's a great thing. And it is a testament to how valuable being here is. That you would travel 3 hours to be here when you were never not here, including the entire ride here. You were not, you're there. And when you completely realize that, you're not going to come here anymore. Because why bother? Why bother? It's really true. And you may not meditate anymore either. Why bother? Why try to get to where you are? There's no trying, there's no getting, you're there. Done. Be there. Live it. And that's it. Any questions? I hope it's simple enough. That was like meditation 101, but trust me, that's the only class we need. Okay, thank you guys.